hope these words resonate with you. That something has to break, that God is on the move, and that on Him there's a firm foundation. I can't think of a better song to lead into what we're going to talk about today. As we talk about things that are going on under the surface in our lives, as we talk about struggles that are going on that we may not even fully see, it's those things that have to break. So I want to invite you in. You may be seated. My name is Matt. If you're new to Relevant, if you've come and your first Sundays here have been in the last 2 or 3 weeks, you have no idea who I am, because I haven't been here. I've been gone for the past few weeks. It's kind of rare for me. I've been in ministry a long time, and I don't miss church, especially my church. And I'm blessed. My wife and I, part of the dream team here. Any other dream teamers in the house in here that serve? Around here, they call me Pastor Matt. I like to be involved a lot in the teaching. It's kind of my area, being able to teach and challenge and lead. And I'm blessed to be able to be here this morning, to be able to share with you in this new sermon series that got kicked off last week, called Mirrors. So we've gone the last month. It's been kind of a Sabbath month for us. I've been with family, weekend of ministry in Chicago, and so we're blessed to be back. I made Tira, when I walked through the door, I said, you got to say it, tell me welcome home, because it's been a while. Maybe it's been a while for you. Maybe it's been a while for you, not just Relevant. Maybe it's been a while for you with God. And if that's you, we say welcome home. I want to introduce you today to part 2 of this series called Mirrors. We're looking into the scriptures as if they're mirrors. We're looking in and we're trying to see. We're looking at men and women of faith, heroes, if you will, Hall of Famers. And we see the obvious in the mirror. In them and through them, we see the big things. Last week, Pastor Trice talked about Moses. And when you say the word Moses, there's some things that just pop into your mind. Those are the obvious, the big things. I know when I get in the mirror, there's some obvious things, like follically challenged. It's obvious. But then when I think of mirrors, I want to add a piece to this series. When I think of mirrors, I think of driving. I think of 131, to be specific, in this town. And I think of my rearview mirror, right? And then I've got my 2 side mirrors. And I can check and check and check and check. But if I don't, when I switch lanes, turn my head and do what? Check my blind spot. See, the mirror doesn't help you with the blind spot. Now, maybe, I know I'm talking to some people in here that have like the fancy car with the flashing light. I've ridden in one of those. Maybe someday I'll have a car that'll talk to me. My dad's truck vibrates. I didn't know that was a thing. Blind spots. See, no matter whether there's a light or whether you have to turn your head, or your wife tells you, check your blind spot because the guy just honked again. And so as we talk about mirrors, I want to think about what's obvious, but I also want to think about what's not so obvious. What are some things beneath the surface that maybe you don't see? Or maybe you know they're there, but you kind of push them down. Blind spots, mirrors. We're going to look today at the life of the prophet Elijah. We're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 19. If you have your Bibles or your devices and you want to follow along, we're going to spend most of our time there. And we're going to talk about Elijah, maybe not in what you might know. If you know the story of Elijah, there's things that jump out. Here's a little trivia about him. He's one of only 2 people in the Bible that it says never died. Literally, this guy, at the end of his life, God brings a chariot of fire, and he rides off into heaven in a chariot of fire. Now, that's a bad dude right there. most of us know certain stories of Elijah. I think today we're going to tackle one that maybe you're familiar with, but I'm not sure you've probably resonated deeply with this part of his story. Maybe you have. But one of the things that Elijah dealt with was discouragement, despair, I would even say depression. Things that are obvious, and we're going to look at maybe some blind spots that he didn't see that got him to the place where he. And we're give us eyes to see in the next few minutes, Lord. Help us to focus in on your word, to put away distractions and to hear what you would have to say to us. And in an audience this big, people come in carrying all kinds of things. And we carry in, God, what we were dealing with before we got here, or previous week, or this morning, or many of us, some of us are battling our minds of where we're going this afternoon. And Lord, help us to focus in, because you are the God who is. You are the God who was. And you are the God that is to come. And you are here today to speak to us. So help us, Lord, unpack the things of Elijah. In Jesus' name, amen. Talk you through this. I want to give I'm not going there. I'm not talking about this major depressive disorder that maybe some of you have even struggled with, or people you know that have struggled with that really needs medical help. I understand that's a reality for some. What I want to address today, what I want to tackle today is that kind of depression that kind of creeps in unexpectedly. It's kind of seasonal. It may come and go. It could be circumstantial. All of a sudden, you're just cruising through life. You're busy and you're doing things, but yet when you get home at night, you just don't feel right. You're a little overwhelmed, and you don't know why. That person, it's get out of the car. Or maybe you pull up to work in our life, and I think it's true for all of us. If it's not true for you now, it's probably been true for you in the past. And if it's not been true for you in the past, I'm going to predict that it's coming. These up and work. You're done with people, maybe. Maybe you're done with your kids. See, it's temporary sometimes. Heck, there's been moments where it's like, I'm done with you, God. I'm done. And this is where Elijah's at. He's on his knees in the wilderness by himself. And he says, God, I've had enough. I'm finished. I want you to wrestle with that prayer. I want you to wrestle, because I think one of the reasons it was so overwhelming for Elijah in that moment, and again, this is just me here, but I wonder if he saw it coming. I wonder if he just didn't, this is some of this is conjecture. I don't think it's something that he had dealt with over time. I think this was something that was growing in his life, and it was building, and then it finally surfaces. And when it surfaces, it's all the more devastating. He's discouraged. He's not expecting it. And so to understand what's going on in Elijah's life, we have to go backwards. We have to go back and rewind the last 3.5 years of his life. And we'll do this pretty quickly. Some of it you're more familiar with than others. But basically his job, he was a prophet, and God would speak to him to speak to the nation, to try to get them to turn and repent. And they would not. And so he told Elijah, tell the king, I'm bringing a drought because of the sin and the idolatry in my people. A drought's coming. And so he goes to King Ahab and he says, no more rain. God is displeased. We've tried. We've warned. The light on the mirrors have been blinking, and nobody's checking their spots, and everybody's doing their own thing. And so Elijah tells King Ahab. Well, King Ahab kind of blows him off. And then it doesn't rain. And then it doesn't rain some more. And then for months it doesn't rain. And there's a drought. Things are drying up. And King Ahab, he does what anybody would do. He's not going to take it up with God. So he's going to blame Elijah. He's going to point the finger at Elijah. The messenger, often gets the blame, right? He threatens Elijah's life, and I'm paraphrasing. You can read and I encourage you this week, go into 1 Kings about chapter 13 and read through chapter 19, chapter 20. But so Elijah is being blamed. And people are pointing the finger at Elijah, and for 3 years there's drought. For 3 years there's no rain. And Elijah's living with this burden that he's carried, this message, but something else is happening here. During this 3 years, and you can read this in 1 Kings, I don't have time to go through it all, but during this time, God is doing amazing things in him and through him. He is speaking to him. There are miracles that are happening. He is being used. So simultaneously, there's this issue brewing, and yet there's this good stuff happening. And I believe Elijah, he's kind of pushing on. He just pushed through those 3 years. And then that prolonged drought kind of ends pretty dramatically. You see, the majority of the people had turned to the prophet of Baal. They were worshiping the prophet of Baal, by the way, the god Baal, and the false god. And by the way, Baal is the god of rain. Shouldn't surprise us that if people are going to bow down to the god of rain, God's going to send the drought. Don't miss that. Don't miss that blind spot, that if you're going to bow down to the God of money and the God of finance, don't think that God's going to sit there and allow all that to just be blessed. If you're going to bow down to vertical relationships and make all your this relationship what's supreme and what's God, and neglect this relationship, don't question why these relationships seem awful messed up. Because God doesn't bless his competition. And you might see some good at times, but over the haul. So Elijah, it all leads to the cage match of the ages on Mount Carmel. This is a prehistoric's not the right word. This is an ancient world match for the ages. This would have been pay-per-view to the max. I mean, you've got Elijah over here, and he builds this altar, and he puts a sacrifice on it. And over here, you've got 450 prophets of Baal, and they build an altar, and they put a sacrifice, and here it's on. Both sides are going to cry out to their God, call for fire to come down and consume it up. A few years ago, Alyssa and I got to go to Israel, and we got to stand on Mount Carmel. It was a surreal place. I mean, standing in the very summit where Elijah took on these prophets. And so it's on. And the prophets of Baal go first. And they're calling on their God, and nothing's happening because he's not real. We do that so much. We look for the things that don't have the answer. And I used to use this verse or this passage when I was in high school as an athlete because I justified that it was okay to trash talk. Because Elijah starts trash talking. I mean, he's like, hey, I think you need to yell a little louder. He doesn't hear you. And then he taunts me more. He's like, I think your God is sleeping. Why don't you yell a little louder? And he's literally taunting the prophets of Baal. And they start to cut themselves. And as they cut themselves, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Now it's Elijah's turn. Now Elijah puts a little twist to the battle. He goes to some servants and he says, hey, I need you to go get those 12 barrels over there and take them down and fill them full of water. And I want you to pour them all over my altar. Okay, first of all, trying to light a fire doused in water doesn't make much sense. Second of all, more importantly, what we often miss in this story is water was at a premium. Remember, it's 3 years of drought, and these guys are saying, wait a minute, Elijah, we can't pour 12 barrels. You know how much 12 barrels of water is worth right now? I believe Elijah basically was saying, I know that you don't have a lot. I know you don't have much water. I know that water's important to us right now, but we're about to watch God move in a powerful way. And if we're going to watch God move in a powerful way, I'm asking you to provide something that means a lot to you that you don't have much of. I'm asking you to lay a sacrifice down on this altar. So they bring the water. They pour it on. Elijah prays. Fire comes down, consumes the sacrifice, consumes all the water. God's people go crazy, as if they've been following him the whole time, like talk about fair weather. They chase the prophets of Baal off the cliff. And here's what we don't often talk about at the end of this story. In Elijah's victory, it begins to rain. The rain comes. And I can picture Elijah standing on that mountain with his arms open and the rain pelting. And it says in 1 Kings 19 that after that, he literally, filled with adrenaline, powered on, he ran 18 miles away to the city of Jezreel. He takes off running. This guy just won. He's heavyweight champ, Super Bowl champ, MLB World Series champ, all of it wrapped up into one. And now he's on the run, and he runs to this town, and he's alone. And he falls to his knees, and he says, God, I've had it done. I've had enough. So what happened? I think for 3 years, here's what happened. He persevered. For 3 years, he stood strong. For 3 years, he faced overwhelming odds. For 3 years, he fought the good fight, and now there's a huge victory, and he's on the other side of it. And you think, I know you've thought this, once you're on the other side of it, you're going to have, refreshment, peace, shalom. You think, okay, I'm done, I've been faithful, I've done what you've asked me to do. On the other side, it's going to be good. And instead, on the other side, for Elijah, he felt some things he didn't understand. He felt some despair. He felt some depression. He felt the weight of it all. And finally, as he gets through it, he doesn't know what else to do, so he runs. He runs away. Some of you in here can understand that. Some of you understand that because you've persevered. You've been through a difficult season in your life, a triumph. You've thought these words, once I get through this, then, once the kids are grown, yeah, I'm there now. Once I'm retired, then it's going to be green pastures and milk and honey. Once I make a little bit more money so I can have a little bit more freedom and have some extra resources, then it's going to be, once I get the degree, once I get this job, once I get, fill in the blank. But what happens, not always, but many times, you get across that line and it seems harder, or you feel overwhelmed. And you're like, man, these last few years have been long and hard, and you push through, and when you go through it, because, you're doing it because once I get past it, I'm going to feel good. And I didn't expect to feel this way. And maybe you can relate, because, man, I know I can. I love to read books written by pastors. I love to hear pastors that are authentic in their struggle. Sometimes we idolize pastors, and when they fall, it's like there's a term out there that there's it's kind of a cult following. Now there's Netflix specials. We love to celebrate it when pastors fall. And one of my favorite that I read is Kyle Idleman, and during the pandemic, I read some of his work. Kyle is a mega church pastor in Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And as he wrote, and later put it into a sermon or into a podcast, he took over as the lead pastor 20,000 members in the city of Louisville in his church. He took over for his mentor. And when you lead 20,000 people in a church, you kind of feel like you're somebody. And even though he felt like he was somebody, he knew he had some struggles, but he had to keep pushing through. And so he writes that in his city, things started to unravel. You may have heard the name Breonna Taylor. And the fallout of Louisville after that. You may have seen the mass shootings in that city. You may have heard of the pandemic that didn't just hit Louisville. And navigating a church of 20,000 on how to still find community. And he's grinding through. And he said his wife was the first, and then his leaders all said, you're moving at an unhealthy pace. You're not seeing some things. There's blind spots, Kyle, and you got to stop, and you got to deal with this. And he wouldn't. And so they snuck in what they called an executive coach. They said, hey, we'd love for you to meet with this executive coach. And he writes that he thought, oh, yeah, I'm an important person. I assume important people meet with executive coaches. He said 30 minutes into that meeting, he realized this isn't an executive coach, it's a therapist. Here's what the therapist said for him to do. He said, I want you over the next 2 weeks to write down all the moments when you're sad. He writes that his immediate thought was, well, that's stupid. Who does that? Hey, let's get a journal of all my sad moments this week. When you go out with your husband or your wife or a friend, you sit around and say, let's celebrate all the sad things that happened this week. And Kyle says, I've spent my whole life trying to learn how to forget that stuff and focus on what is joyful. And so 2 weeks go by, he meets with the therapist. The therapist goes, well, let's hear some of the things you were sad about. And he goes, I didn't do it. And he said, why didn't you do it? And he goes, because I don't think it'll help. Why would I concentrate on the things that make me sad? And the therapist said, here's what I think. He said, I think that you think that it's not very spiritual to be sad. And he said, and this time, instead of just thinking it, I looked at him and said, well, that's stupid. He goes, I know the Psalms of Lament. I know that Jesus wept. I know that sadness can be spiritual. And then this is the road that the therapist went. He said, I think you have a hard time holding on to joy and sadness simultaneously. Like you can be joyful and you can have sorrow at the same time. And I think what you're doing, Kyle, is you're continuing to use the joy to mask what is sad. And you better be careful. Because if you don't acknowledge it as you go, it will build. And it'll destroy you. I remember reading that during the pandemic. And I remember thinking of my own journey. I had a pretty easy childhood. Pretty trauma-free. Great parents. We weren't wealthy by any means, but I didn't miss a meal. Went to college, got married. Things were pretty good. And then, as you get older, things start to happen, right? Responsibilities. I'd never had to worry about insurance before or savings before. Then I have 4 kids. Are you kidding me? Whose idea was that? I'm joking. But it got hard. And as I got older, in my career and in my positions, I got elevated into leadership. And it was one of those, I'm not trying to brag, but it was one of those things where it was like a curse that every time I turned around, somebody was putting me in charge of something. And I felt inadequate, but when you're in those situations, you can't show it. And I know my wife would see it. And there were things when you're in ministry, people don't always like you. Jesus promised that, by the way. I was a high school varsity coach. So those that played loved me, and those that didn't, well, you fill in the blank. So my kids and my family had to hear things about me. And I acted like it was no big deal. There was trauma There was struggle. And I read this about Kyle Idleman, and it shook me. Because it was exactly what my wife had been telling me for years. You're not letting anyone in. You're pretending like everything's great, but underneath there, you see, there's an iceberg. And above the water, there's a little piece of ice, but it's what was below the water that nobody sees. That's what took down the Titanic. And if we don't go beneath the surface, if we are not willing to go below, and so what I know I'm personalizing this text a little bit. I know, forgive me that I am, but I just think this is the case for the prophet Elijah. I think maybe he was pushing hard. He was going hard. He was doing the work of God. He felt good about that. He had responsibilities. He was marching on. All the while, he was afraid. He was struggling. He didn't know how it was going to end. He felt inadequate. All these things. And instead of acknowledging them along the way, he let them build. He let them build. And he finds himself under a tree alone, crying out to God, saying, I'm finished. Just take me. And I don't know, maybe today, maybe you find yourself there. Or maybe you don't find yourself there, but you can sense that the journey has been moving in that direction. I mean, what do? How do we deal with these blind spots? I want to take the next few minutes and look at Elijah's life and try to say, okay, what caused him, and then what did God do to help him move forward, to recover? The first thing I want us to notice, we've already set up, but revisit it quickly. He was coming off a great victory. He was coming off a great victory. I remember when I was a high school coach and I won the conference championship, and it was the biggest victory in that school's history. And I remember some things that unfolded afterward, and I remember thinking, this really wasn't that big of a deal. And we had worked and hyped, and it was a big deal in the moment, but you've been there, maybe as an athlete, where you've accomplished something, and now you're thinking, and now what's next? And then what? Or maybe it's just more real life type stuff. Let me talk to the moms in here for a minute. Maybe perhaps you've experienced this in pregnancy. You've had a difficult pregnancy, and then the baby comes, and you're excited, and everybody's excited, and for a few days, it's like a party, a celebration, everybody's happy. And then after a week or two, like all of a sudden these feelings start to settle in. I mean, I don't know by experience, but what I've been told is that there can be this feeling of overwhelmingness, maybe a little bit of depression. And you didn't ask for it. It just kind of came in unexpectedly. And the tears just come, and you don't know what to do. And everybody that shows up is always happy and excited, and then they go away, and you're there by yourself. And you can't share this with anybody because you're supposed to be filled with joy. It's supposed to be a joyous occasion. And so you isolate. And the more you isolate, the bigger the blind spot becomes, and the heavier it becomes, and the heavier it becomes, the more you isolate, and the more you isolate, the heavier it becomes, and this cycle just wages on and on. Or maybe you don't relate to being a pregnant mom, but maybe you're someone who's been driven by motivation, by a title. Maybe you're one of those people who said, man, once I get this job, once I get this promotion, once I get the degree, once I pass this test, once I'm able to buy this car, once I'm able to do this or to do that, and then you get the promotion or you get the title, and you should be celebrating, but yet it seems a little heavier. Oh, I didn't know this came with this. Or maybe it's economic success. It's like, here's the thing. I'm talking in a sermon about depression and discouragement and despair, and then I go and throw in people that have money or have success, and you wouldn't think that those people would deal with discouragement and despair, and maybe that's some of you in here, but the problem is they don't want anybody to know. The research says that the highest socioeconomic groups, you are 3 to 5 times more likely to have depression. Now, I don't want to make light and diminish the reality of despair that is very much present when you're trying to come up with money each month to make the bills. That's real. But to understand what Elijah and maybe some of you are going through with this blind spot is that the stress and anxiety and this depression would go away if I reach a certain level of success, if I make it in this world, if I can own this, if I can have that, if I can do this or that with money, if I can get to the place where I'm going to Cancun all exclusive 5 times a year. And then you go and you isolate and you struggle. And you wonder, is there more? And you can't talk to anybody about it because who's going to feel sorry for a guy in Cancun 5 times a month? And you feel shame and despair. See, this doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, male or female, young or old. This is real. This is life. And I think some of the dynamics at play here for Elijah also are at play here in our lives. I think there's a mirror here that we can see. You see, he's had incredible success. He's been on the mountain. Everybody knows it. He's feeling this way, and now he runs and he's in isolation and doesn't think anybody will understand. Another thing I think that's going on with Elijah is he just has this sense of futility, meaning that nothing's changed. So the king wanted him dead because of the drought. The drought's over. And in 1 Kings 19, 1 and 2, it says, King Ahab told his queen Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he killed the prophets of Baal. And so Jezebel sent a message to Elijah, and it said this, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I don't make your life like one of them. And he's right back where he started. He thought he had overcome, and now he's got a new threat. And let's be honest, there's just some discouragement that comes with that. There's just some discouragement that comes with thinking that what you set out to think was going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. I mean, like, I'm going to make my marriage better, so I'm going to work at it. I'm going to do the things I need to do, and then a week later, nothing really feels any different. A month later, your spouse doesn't seem to notice. And it's the same old arguments and the same old accusations, and at some point you just feel like nothing's going to change. And you're never going to change the way your spouse feels about you, so you just sit under a tree and say, I've had enough. Or maybe you're trying to get ahead financially, and every time you do, the car breaks down, something in the house breaks down, somebody needs some money, and all of a sudden you're right back in the hole. And you feel yourself going, that's enough. I'm done. Just had enough. Or you're going to make some changes as a parent, so you read a book. You know, that's always the way we go. You're going to listen to a podcast. So I'm reading a book, and I'm listening to a podcast about being a parent. And as that begins to unfold, the kids are still arguing and complaining. And 3 or 4 days into it, I'm exhausted, and you feel like I've just gone backwards. And so you sit under a tree like Elijah, and you're like, that's it, God, I'm done. It's enough. Have you been there? And then there's what he dealt with that's blatant, that's obvious in the mirror. It wasn't a blind spot. Elijah's just discouraged because people are after him. He's not a popular guy. Jesus told his disciples in the upper room, remember, when they hate you, they hated me first. In this world, here's a promise. In this world, you will have what? Trouble. But the rest of that promise is, but take heart, because I've overcome this world. That's not what Elijah sees right now. Life's unfair. He's done everything God wants him to do. And he just can't see at this point what God can do with him anymore and how God's going to work it for good or even redeem it. I think we can relate well because I think what we often want in our moments of pity, in our moments where we kind of have the victim mentality, or in our moments where we're sitting under the tree saying, God, I've had enough, I think that we struggle with what I call and I just call it this because I just read this article, the LaQuerdra Edwards effect. Now, who's she? In 2022, Washington Post did this study. She was on CNN, Fox News. She was all over the place. LaQuerdra Edwards. In 2022, she was in a convenience store outside of LA. She was minding her own business. She was going to buy a $1 lottery ticket. While she's getting her ticket, some guy rams in the back of her and knocks her into the lottery, what do you call those things? Dispenser? I don't know, dispensers. And she rams into that. He gives her a glare. She gives him a glare. She's ticked. She's mad at the world at this point in her life. He barges on out, and she looks, and he pushed her into the button that kicked out a $40 lottery ticket. And she's hot. She does not want to pay $40 for a lottery ticket because she's never won. So she rips it off. She goes up to the counter, buys the ticket. She's cussing under her breath. She goes over to the coffee counter, scratches it off. She won $10 million. And all of a sudden, her perspective about the dude that just left the building is a little different. All of a sudden, that $40 that she wasn't sure was on her check card, no big deal. And when I read that, I think that's where we often are with God. We want the immediacy of it. I know that's where I've been at times where, God, what are you doing with me here? I can't see it. I've been knocked over and pushed, and this happened and that happened, and I don't understand. I've had enough. And in our fast-paced social media scrolling life, we want it right now. And I don't think that's just a young person problem. I think it's an American problem. And what I've learned in my older age, it isn't always immediate. God draws it out. He often is working things for the good in ways we don't see, we don't understand. One of the most beautiful things I've been able to experience in my time in the last few years here in Grand Rapids is I've reflected. I mean, when we moved here, we knew no one. And God sent us on a journey. And I've been able to reflect, and I've been able to think about all the things that I've experienced, been around, what God has done, who God has used to accomplish things in my life, even the people who treated me poorly, unfairly, or unjustly. God has used them to connect me with other people, like you all. And God has put people into my life, and there's just so much that we don't know that's going on, and I believe that was true for Elijah. He had some blinders on, and from his perspective, he sat underneath this tree, and he felt the position was just impossible. I also think, the last thing, I think he was just tired. I think he was exhausted. Have you been there? I mean, I think every light on his dashboard was blinking, emotional, spiritual, physical. I think relationally, when one light blinks, you got a problem, but you can keep driving. You get 3 or 4 lights on, you're in real trouble. He's on empty. 1 Kings 19, verse 3, it says this. It says he came to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servant there while he went another day's journey into the desert. So what does he do? He isolates. After his prayer, he goes to another town, drops his servant off, says, you stay here. He goes off into the desert to isolate. I believe he was going to die. He isolates. See, we start to feel the weight of our despair, and we don't feel like being around anybody, so we isolate ourselves, and the more we isolate, the more we feel that way, and the more we feel that way, the more we isolate, and that cycle, and man, I've been there. Man, I've been in those moments where I don't get out of bed. I don't deal with today, God. Dr. Tyler Vander Weel, a Harvard medical professor, he did a 25-year study that actually ended during the pandemic. I think it's fascinating that it ended then because his study was on people in the medical profession. I just want you to hear some of these numbers. Try to go quick with this. But he studied medical workers who went to church, to Christian church. This is what he found in 20-year study. He said medical workers who said they went to church frequently, mostly Christian churches, were 30% less likely to become depressed, 50% less likely to divorce, and 5 times less likely to commit suicide than those who never attend. He said healthcare professionals who attended service weekly were 33% less likely to die during the 16-year follow-up that he studied this group of people. And he also found that regular church attendance helps shield children from what he called the big 3 dangers of adolescence: depression, substance abuse, and premature sexual activity. And he writes, people who attend church as children tend to be a little happier, they tend to be more forgiving, and they tend to have a sense of mission and purpose to volunteer. Regular service attenders also had fewer what he called deaths of despair, meaning deaths by suicide, drug overdose, or alcohol, than people who don't ever attend church. Reducing those deaths, listen to this, 68% by women and 33% by men. Y'all, those numbers are remarkable. Why? Because of community. This isn't a pitch to just come and sit in a church. You can come in here each and every week and you can isolate. You can drown in a pool of lifeguards. Or you can recognize the benefits that are all around you. I remember we first walked into Relevant. It was in a movie theater. There were 19 people. I think that first time it was like 7 because it was 30 below. Everybody knew everybody for that first year. Every event was an all-church event. Now look at us. 2 services. Nobody hardly knows anybody. That's not a bad thing. We continue to grow. We continue our outreach. And what I mean by nobody knows anybody, that's not true. What I mean is we can't know everybody anymore. But y'all, this church, it's far from perfect. But the power is you, is us. We need each other. The one thing that is impressive about this church is countless people who are now organically just creating community. Fierce Sisterhood isn't just an event anymore. It's 2 ladies meeting at a coffee shop. It's a group of other ladies getting together. We got guys going to different men's retreats. We've got things happening all over, and I'm telling you, be a part of it. We need each other. And it's not just a Relevant church thing. The numbers don't lie. And so God does a few things to wrap up here. He does a few things for Elijah. First thing he does is he lets him rest. He gives him a Sabbath. 1 Kings 19:5, he laid down under a tree, fell asleep. An angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." And he looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and then he went back to sleep. I love the gentleness of God here. He let him rest. Sabbath is real. How arrogant are we sometimes to think we don't need rest when God built it into his plan and he rested for an entire day of creation? And you can find rest here. I know sometimes maybe the dream teamer's like, can I? But you can. Let me tell you something. We see the people that are about to come back on stage, play these keys and drums and sing, and, somebody stands up here and preaches and teaches, and we kind of put that on a pedestal like, wow, that's. But one of the most powerful spiritual gifts that you can provide is the gift of hospitality. See, you have the ability to be the hands and feet of Jesus in this world who says, let's share a meal. Let's sit and talk. Let me listen to you. Let's share our lives together. Let's do what God did right here with Elijah in the desert. Let's just rest together. And it's important in the areas even where you serve that you find ways together to do this. Second thing God does for Elijah is he gives him his presence. This is my favorite part. Don't miss this. 19 verse 11, go out and stand by the mountain, Elijah, in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord's going to pass by. And there was a great wind like a tornado, and God wasn't in it. And there was a powerful earthquake, and God wasn't in the earthquake. And there was a devastating fire that consumed everything, and God wasn't in the fire. And then Elijah hears a whisper. God was in the whisper. And in that whisper, God gave him his presence. I'm not knocking what we do. I love worship. I'm not knocking what churches do. But y'all, sometimes where his presence will meet you is in the quiet, with no noise, no music. Just you sitting and saying, God, speak to me. And his whisper can be louder than all the noise. God wants his presence to be with you, and he gives his presence. With Elijah, God showed up. Elijah's out there. You know what? He never says, how dare you talk to me that way, Elijah? How dare you tell me you're done? No. He's gentle. He gives him rest, and he whispers his name. And then, the last thing he does in verse 14, first of all, he asks him, why are you here, Elijah? Why are you here? And Elijah goes off again. What do you mean, why I'm here? I just told you I'm done. I've done everything. I've been so faithful. I've been so zealous. They've killed all the other prophets. I'm alone. I'm by myself. I'm finished. And if you read the passage, God gently restores them. And he says, you know what? You're not done. And he sends them. He says, go back the way you came. I've got more work for you. So sometimes what we need after a little bit of rest and the presence of God is to be repositioned, to go back right into the fire and do his work, but do it differently. Recognize that there's this reality that it's not always going to be victory, and I have to continue to view the warning signs. I have to look in the mirror, and I have to examine myself so that I'm healthier, so that I can even do a better job serving the King. You see, I'm not done with you, Elijah. You're going to go back. You're going to anoint another king, and I'm going to bring a guy into your path named Elisha. He's going to be a helper. He's going to be a friend. He's going to encourage you. You're going to encourage him. There's work to be done. And in there, he also says, and by the way, Elijah, 7,000 of them didn't bow to Baal. You're not alone. Y'all look around this room. You're not alone. You're not alone. I don't think Elijah wanted to hear what he heard in the last part. I think he liked the bread. I think he was good with the rest and the whisper. But like, go back and do this again? Oh, man. And he got up. I think when we feel overwhelmed, I think when we feel depressed and despair, we need to find rest. We need to find God's presence. Then we need to keep going. Another one of my favorite preacher stories is a guy named Fred Craddock, and I'm going to close with this story. Fred became a pastor a little later in life. And he was pretty successful, and I was reading something he wrote in a devotional about his dad. He said he tried to get his dad to come to church for years. And every time he said, son, I trust you, but I think you're crazy going to that church, working at that church. Church, they're just worshiping something invisible up there. It's not real. And by the way, they just want one more name on their book, and they want one more dollar in their bucket. And he'd have this conversation with his dad over and over, and his dad would just laugh. Those hypocrites, those people, I'm not going to be a part of that. I grew up with people in the church. I don't want to be a part of that. And then he got cancer. And he got cancer so bad that he had to have his throat removed. And he was confined to a hospital room for the last month of his life. And every day, even though he had never, ever been to church, the church went to him. And his son's church just started showing up. And every day, people would show up. They'd read to him. They'd pray over him. They'd sing to him. They'd bring the guitar. They'd spend time with his dad. And the church just was the church. And the last night Fred spent with his dad stopped him from talking, grabbed a piece of paper and wrote He wrote these words from Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet. He wrote, "In this harsh world, draw your breath in pain and tell my story." And Fred was kind of like, "What?" Like, "Dad, what's your story? What do you want me to tell people?" And he grabbed the paper back and he wrote 3 words. I was wrong. I was wrong. Y'all, I don't know where you've been. I don't know your view of church. I don't know if you're even just here out of spite. Maybe you're here searching. Maybe you feel that moment. Maybe there's a blind spot creeping up. Maybe you keep pushing it away because you got stuff to do, you got places to go, things to do, and I'm here to tell you, you need to acknowledge it. You need to have people around you. You need to have a community. Here, you won't know everybody, but you can be known, and you can be loved, and you can know, and you can love. And we invite you to be a part of that. And I don't know your story. I don't know your story like I just read about the story of Fred and his dad. But if your version of church is distorted, and you may have a real life story that would arguably be accurate, I won't doubt that. I've been in church a long time. But if I believe in the church, and if you feel the church isn't here for you, I want you to hear these words from me. You are wrong. Not because we have great programs. Not because we have a band and a rock and keyboard player with a fogger. Not because we have one of the coolest pastors with ripped jeans, and obviously that's not me. Because we have you. We have us. And at this stage of my life, I'm indebted to that. Do you have somebody? Are you walking alone? Are you on your knees saying, God, I've had enough? Don't turn away from him. He's right there. He wants to give you rest. He wants to give you his presence. And he wants to do that today. Why? Because there's a lot of work to be done out there. And when you get his presence and you get a little rest and a little charge, he's going to work through you. And then don't forget, you need to come back and get a little rest. You need to connect with his presence, and then you go back and do it again. There's an ingredient there that's powerful. And maybe you've never even ever said yes to God. Maybe you've never really investigated this Jesus guy who took 12 ragamuffin dudes and some rough women. He changed the world. He changed the world. We're sitting here still talking about it. And in your moments of despair, he will come to you. We invite you, scan the card. I invite you this. Maybe what you need to do after this last song is go right out this hall, first door on your right, and just get on your knees in the prayer room and say, God, I've had enough. I've had enough of doing it my own way. I'd have enough of denying you. I've had enough of you, and I'm ready to restart. See, I love that God just said, come to me, all who you are weary and heavy burdened. This was Jesus' words. He said, come to me, you who are weary and heavy burdened, and you will find rest for your soul. And he wants that for you. I'm going to pray, and then Pastor Latricia is going to come up and share some announcements. Just share a bunch of ways. There's a lot going on, a bunch of ways you can connect and find community. And then we're going to sing and praise one last song. Let's pray. God, I thank you. I thank you for whispering to me. Sometimes I'm looking in all the wrong places. I'm looking in the loud places and the places that are shock and all, and you just are there, and you're just like, trust me. Follow me. Quit comparing. Quit worrying about the circumstances. Just come here, find rest. Listen to me, and then go. God, I pray that if there's anyone here this morning that is needing you, I pray they would turn right now. Not because this is the finish line, because the battle just begins. But because you're in it, you're all over it. I pray for this church. May we continue to pour into each other. We need each other, Lord. We need to be the church, not some American institution, country club thing. We need to be your people. So God, be with us, challenge us, stretch us. Thank you for all you do in Jesus' name.
Let's give it up for Pastor Matt. What an amazing word. So many rich nuggets. So good. As Pastor Matt said, we weren't meant to do life alone. Connecting in community is so important. And here at Relevant, we love to create opportunities for you to meet with each other, to get to know each other beyond a Sunday experience. And so this week, we are kicking off our Relevant Regroups. Regroups is here. If you are new and you don't know what regroups are, it is our Relevant small groups, and we are meeting at 2 different parks this year. We're meeting at Creekside Park for those of you in the Kentwood, Caledonia, Byron Center area. We're meeting over there, and then we also are meeting at Lincoln Park on the northwest side over by Bridge Street. And regroups is an opportunity for you to meet each other, get to build relationships with each other, and it's an opportunity for you to grow in your faith. We are going to be dissecting this word from today, talking about what did it mean to us, how we can apply this word to our life. And so I invite you to sign up on the connection card or scan that QR code if you haven't, to get plugged into Regroup. It is amazing and you don't want to miss out. Also this week, coming up this Saturday is our Serve Day. We are participating as a church in National Serve Day. Churches all across the U.S. are going to be serving the cities that they live in, and Relevant will be doing the same. We have 3 opportunities for you to serve. We're serving youth at Base Camp Ministry, who was our Relevant Loves GR Organization of the Month last month. We're going to be serving families at Matthew's house, those who are under-resourced individuals. We're going to be showing them love by serving them meals and just connecting with them. And then we're going to be creating cards for the elderly in partnership with Forget Me Not Ministries. And so that's going to be at Baker Books. So there's multiple ways for you to serve. It's only a couple hours out of your Saturday. Sign up, get plugged in. Let's show our hearts by using our hands to serve our community. Also, on the weekend of the 21st and the 22nd is Relevant Family Fun Weekend. And we're kicking it off with a date night. If you are married or engaged, officially engaged, ladies, you have a ring, join us for a date night. We're going to be at Battle GR, and it's going to be an amazing night of connecting with other couples. There's so much energy in just connecting with other couples. You know, we have couples that have been married for a couple months to those who have been married for 40 years. So come out, connect. We're going to be doing some little friendly competition, and we're also going to be digging into how can we improve our communications in our relationship. So come out for a fun night. It's a Friday night at Battle GR. Sign up, space is limited, so get plugged in, don't wait. And then on that Saturday, we are having a Relevant Re-Kids family meetup. The Re-Kids children are getting together because we believe it's important for kids to build community too. And so we are doing a meetup at the Grand Rapids Children's Museum on the 22nd at 11 a.m. So parents, bring your kiddos out to have some fun at the Children's Museum downtown. And lastly, I want to invite you all to save the date for our Relevant Heart and Soul Night. We are going to close the month of July with worship. We will be meeting here at Potter's House, and it's just going to be a time of worship. We're going to pray, and it's just going to be an amazing time. So if you've never experienced a Relevant Heart and Soul Night, get ready, invite your family and friends out, and come ready for an amazing worship night. Here at Relevant Church, we believe that generous people change the world. Generous people truly change the world, and because of our generosity, we are able to serve our community. We are able to help those in need. We are able to take a mission trip to Guatemala that's coming up because of our generosity, as well as meet here on Sundays. And so we invite you to partner with us through giving. There are 3 ways that you can give. You can give at relevantchurchgr.com/giving. You can text to give any dollar amount to 84321, or you can give on your way out. And so we invite you to partner with us through your giving. And now I ask that you will stand up and join us as we close out with one more worship song.